Good evening, everybody. It's 9:30 on the East Coast, 6:30 on the West Coast on a Monday. It must mean it's time for your Calamity Jane live stream. James, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing just great. Now, fortunately, we only have threes to fives of viewers watching our stream any given time, so
Well,
we didn't
maybe not
start
live,
on
maybe
time
not live,
today.
but we get more viewers. We get more viewers. Like the average watch time on YouTube now is apparently up to 4.5 hours,
Oh,
and we're
okay.
close to 34 views per video now, or something like
Oh,
that.
interesting.
Yeah. So
Interesting.
we may not get a lot of people watching us live, but we do get people watching. We do from time to
Yeah.
time.
Regardless, because of technical difficulties on my end and technology, we started at 6:31 ish,
Yes.
6:32 ish.
Yes.
We were off by a little bit because Eric and I were trying to troubleshoot this weird delay that I kind of perceived the last two times we streamed, but I think we're good.
Oh, good. Yeah, I mean, we always tell everybody, give us 10 minutes. If we don't show up 10 minutes, that's the rule. You're free to leave after that point. Just like in high school, remember the 10-minute rule that no one ever
Yeah.
folled, right? We always said,
Oh,
if the teacher's 10 minutes late, we're out. And then no one, whatever. Where would we go? I mean, exactly. Like, the rebel kids probably had something to do. They'd go smoke cigarettes or probably more likely weed in the bathroom. But,
true.
I was not one of those kids, so...
No, I wasn't.
So it feels like our latency's workable this week, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Great.
I think so.
Okay. Good.
I think
good.
so.
Good.
But to answer your question, yeah, things are just dandy on my side. How are things over with you in Georgia?
Oh, still recovering, man. I will tell you, it's hot, man. I don't. So I've never understood, and maybe you know the answer to this. When you look at like weather apps or the Weather Channel or whatever, it goes, temperature 95 degrees feels like 107 degrees. I'm like, okay, so what do I care about the 95 number? If you're telling me it feels like 107, perception is reality. So I'm perceiving that it's 107 degrees. Therefore, as far as I'm concerned, it's 107 degrees.
I guess they have to follow. Yeah, it's a good one. First of all, I want to. Okay, to answer your question, yeah, I think they just have to follow the instrument that's reading the thing, and that's officially what it says. So you have to be binary about it, scientifically say it is officially this degrees, even though we humans, perceive it to be hotter.
Yeah.
I guess, but I don't know. I'm no scientist, as many people are going to be shocked.
You've got a PhD in asking.
Yeah, so I don't know. That's what my suspicion is. We're using an instrument, and it's this binary thing. This is the number it tells us. So therefore, it is this. But
I suspect that has something to do with if you remove all humidity and other variables, then this is what the temperature is. But given that we've been hovering between anywhere between 60 and 80% humidity the last couple of weeks down here. I think that the humidity has something to do with what the actual, because when it's that humid, your body doesn't like cast off the sweater. I don't know. I'm sure there's some reason, some scientific reason, like you said. But regardless, it's been unbelievably hot down here. And last weekend we went up to the mountains of North Georgia. I use those in quotation marks because having lived in Seattle for almost 20 years, I know what mountains actually are. And
hey, guess what? You're a mountain snob like me.
I am absolutely. Oh yeah, you grew up in Utah, so you know exactly what I'm talking about.
We have mountains here in Los Angeles too, but I look at them and I scoff with my snobbiness.
Oh yeah, no, I'm a
mountains.
Absolute mountain elitist. Absolute mountain elitist.
I am too, man. I'm in the same club. I meet my wife. She always rolls her eyes because she's native Los Angelino. So
No, I miss. I mean, I miss a lot of things about Seattle, but one of the things that I do miss is like basically driving anywhere in that city and seeing mountains, right, north, east, and south of you, and then on to the west, you see nothing but like water, and it's amazing.
Yeah, you don't even need a compass. You know where you're going.
Right? It's just amazing. Yeah. And then, but anyway, so we went up to the mountains here, Helen, Georgia specifically, which is, it's a Bavarian themed town, which is I find really humorous because Washington has a very similar town called Leavenworth. It is also a mountain town.
Okay.
And it's just sort of nestled in this little valley, and
Mm-hmm.
everything is decked up to look like a Bavarian village in Germany. Even the Wendy's
Oh
in
wow,
Berlin
interesting.
is
Okay.
got a facade that makes it look like a Bavarian structure. Great time. We went up for my friend's birthday party. Rented an Airbnb, spent a couple of nights up there. It was a great time, but I mean, it was so hot. It was so hot.
Mm.
Um, but whatever. We paced ourselves, and I think we got out unscathed for the most part. But that being said, I am still just wrecked from it. I mean,
Mm.
the heat and all the drinking, and we weren't just sitting around doing nothing. I mean, like we went out, we walked through the
Yeah.
town. I mean, we actually went on a hike to a waterfall. I mean, like we really did a lot, and it was great. I mean, it was a great trip, but I'm just so old. Just it takes longer to recover at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, I say I'm
Yeah.
so old, and I recognize that I'm in my early 40s, and so that only your mileage only goes so far with that. But it is one of those things.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're slowly on the mend. I'm sorry that you're tired, but
Yeah,
it sounds
it's
to
a
me
good
like some of it
tired.
can't
Yeah,
be.
it was worth it.
Yeah.
Well earned. Well earned.
Yeah.
So
All right. Well, I'll roll into something to work on when we keep on talking.
yeah, what are we working on tonight?
Let's see. So share screen, shared. I am going to work on the Warhog running 3/4, and stopping
Ooh, yeah, that's a
that
good.
camera.
That's a good.
Yeah.
That's a good pose. I like it. That'll be. I suspect that will get a lot of use. It's a great
Yeah, we have a
dynamic
couple of.
pose. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. So I'll get to work on that tonight,
Okay.
and yeah, and I'll start using some of the assets we already have built up from our library of Warhog stuff. Even this little side post, like this from now. I mean, I don't know how long we've been on stream for almost 2 years
Yeah,
now. But I think
you did that one back when you were doing the Stampede.
yeah. So I'm gonna grab the same one and put it
Mhm.
over here in this scene right here. You'll see
Uh-huh.
go across the screen. It's really fast, so we'll put that in there and kind of work on these scenes. So scene 18 and scene 17.
Great.
Tonight, so.
That sounds good. Seems
Yeah.
like a good thing to work on. Yeah, I don't.
So,
It's
one question.
Yeah, ask away.
Did you get your AC fixed? Because
I
of all the
did.
you're talking about.
Good
Okay,
Lord.
good.
Yes.
So hey, they came through, right?
They did.
Okay,
It took 3 days, but they finally got it
Uh-huh.
fixed. Which
great.
thank the maker, because after, like, the day after they fixed it, that's when the temperatures really spiked, and it's been
Oh my god.
feels like above 100 degrees since the day after they got it fixed. So it was a lot. I was talking to the maintenance people, and they were just basically in a panic because, as I've mentioned multiple times, Falls at Soap Creek in Marietta, Georgia. I'm just going to say it. Do not ever get an apartment there. It is the worst apartment complex that I have ever lived in my long and illustrious life. They can't keep staff. I talked to one of the front office managers. His last day was on the 11th. I talked to one of the other maintenance people who helped fix my air conditioning. Her last day is this Friday. Everybody's quitting. They can't keep people on staff. And they were in a panic because, I mean, it's summer and it's an old apartment complex, so all of the air conditioning units are breaking in all the apartments, and they're basically just putting out fires everywhere because the people who have managed this complex for so long were just weren't maintaining it, right? And so you've got, I mean, my water heater, actually, if you look at, because water heaters have expiration dates, right? They basically say after 10 years you need to replace this, right?
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh,
Yeah, they do.
Okay.
Yeah, generally speaking, I think that they do. I vaguely recall that because I've had water heaters bursts in the past in other places that I've lived. Or at least or maybe it's not a replace after, or it's like a do not service after date, right? So if it'll keep working, then great, whatever. But yeah, the one house that I lived in, the water heater broke, and the landlord called the maintenance guy. He came out and he said, "I'm sorry, I can't repair this." They're like, "Why not?" And it says, "Do not service after this date," right? So we had to get an entirely new one, which we didn't pay for. The landlord paid for it, but that landlord was phenomenal. I mean, he was great. Anyway, so the do not replace date or the expiration date or whatever it was, I looked on this water heater, and it expired 10 years ago. So
Jeez.
it's been.
So
I mean,
why did that number?
it
Oh,
still
man.
works, but the truth is it's just basically a time bomb, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's gonna break, just like Yellowstone is gonna erupt. It's just a matter of time, right?
Oh, jeez.
And it happened to my upstairs neighbor a month ago now, approximately, which is the reason why my apartment flooded again for the third or fourth time. So,
Hmm.
but anyway, so they did manage to fix it, and then we're in a panic because they had God knows how many other rooms or units to go service before things got wildly out of control as far as the heat is concerned.
Wow. Well, like you said, just in the nick of time. But I'm glad. I'm glad at least that's out of the way. Yeah. Uh, it sucks. You have a ticking time bomb though. But
Well, they're not going to replace it unless it breaks because they're not going to spend the money, right? So,
yeah.
I mean, that's all I can really do. Now, I'm only going to be, I'm not staying here. Come hell or high water, I'm not staying at this complex. I mean, the only reason I was here as long as I was, I mean, the first year I had my identity stolen and I had to completely
Mhm.
freeze my credit. And you can, I think maybe we've already talked about this, so I'm not going to belabor the issue. But I had reasons where I ended up staying here
Yeah.
longer than I intended to. I intended to be out of here after the first year. And just, life is what happens when you're making other plans. I found myself stuck here multiple years. But I don't care what it costs me. I don't care if I'm moving into a cardboard box. I'm not staying at this place for another
Yeah.
year.
You're just over it.
Yeah. So my lease expires at the end of November-ish, and I've got plans to move out. If those fall through, then I will find other plans. But
Okay.
I am not staying here. So hopefully the water heater will last for, halfway through August to September, October, 3.5 months.
Hmm.
And then it'll be somebody else's problem. So, and we love a good SCP. But anyway, enough complaining about real world stuff. I'm gonna go grab something real quick, and it's another fun thing. So I
Okay.
don't know if we've talked about this on the stream, but I'll show everybody.
Okay. Cool. I'm waiting with anticipation. Here. I'm wondering what this is. I have.
So Nintendo does these silly things. Well, not silly. They're actually, I think they're really cool. Where they have, if you subscribe to their online service, they've got these exclusive controllers that you can buy that are replicas of their old console systems controllers.
Oh, here we go.
And so so they have the N64 one, and it is, it is. I mean, perfect. It is a flawless replica, with a couple of they don't have the memory card pack anymore because it's got a built-in rumble. But the other one was super cheap. I actually didn't realize it was so cheap. I got the Super Nintendo one as well, which
Oh, that's pretty rad.
it is. It is not as good as the N64 controller, honestly.
What?
It's missing a couple of critical buttons, so you can't turn it on. You have to turn the system on either on the system itself or using another controller before
Oh.
you can use this, which kind of is disappointing. The N64, you can control it. It's got all the necessary buttons to control it. Although it's still, I feel like they intentionally leave off some of the buttons to discourage players trying to use it for other games. For instance, the Nintendo 64 button, their controller is missing the ZL button because it's not used in the N64 app, right? So it's got the ZR button, but not the ZL button.
Okay.
And I think that they do that to discourage its use for other games. Why? I don't know, but that's my suspicion. It also probably saves them a cent here or two not having to build in those extra buttons.
Yeah.
So between a cost-saving standpoint and discouraging use for anything else, I suspect they do that. But I just bring it up because they're remarkably well constructed. You can tell that this wasn't just some sort of it's not
Yeah.
it's not some crappy Mad Catz controller, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like they
Mm-hmm.
clearly got back out the original plans from the original platforms and just basically made them. I mean, all of the components, everything, like the analog stick is the original analog stick design from the N64. It's not modern stick design or anything like that. it's really cool. And and sometimes I feel like we may be talking, repeating ourselves, but I'm just going to go ahead and do a quick summary in case we have gone over this before. I tried to play a lot of the N64 games. GoldenEye, Banjo-Kazooie, Mario 64, Star Fox 64, Pilotwing 64, all of the classic N64 games. And it was not great, I'll be honest with you. Because the N64 has such an odd controller design. The Pro controller and the Joy-Cons don't translate particularly well. And so what they did, they mapped the C buttons, which are these yellow buttons, to the right stick on the Pro controller. And
yeah,
so
that's right. You were talking about this. Yeah, I think you and I talked about this offline.
Oh, this was offline. Okay. Yeah. I know we've talked about it. I don't know if we've talked about it on the stream. So, okay.
Yeah.
So, it is not surprisingly an imperfect simulacra of the experience that you would be used to on the actual N64. Now, you can get over to a certain point, like Banjo-Kazooie is relatively playable. Star Fox 64 is okay. I found GoldenEye to be unplayable. It was absolutely just not... I gave up on it. I did a couple of stages, and I'm like, I don't even remember why I like this game. So,
yeah.
And I mean, admittedly, these are all very archaic games, and I'm playing them largely out of nostalgia because these are the games of my youth, or some of the games of my youth. But then I bought the N64 controller, and I turned back on the games, and it was just pure muscle memory. Everything fell back into place. I remembered why GoldenEye was fun. All of a sudden, I was able to play Banjo-Kazooie effectively again. And it was a combination of two things. One, all of those games were designed with this interface in mind.
Yeah.
Right? They were designed because the controller was shaped this way. That's how the inputs were built, right? And then the other part of it is just latent muscle memory from hundreds and hundreds of hours playing all of these games in my youth. It was just one of these remarkable things where it wasn't like a pure epiphany, but it was sort of a, holy crap, it really did illustrate how much thought goes into the man-machine interface when it comes to video games, right? And how things can be made better or worse depending on how you change the input device. And because the N64 was such a unique controller, and the GameCube controller was too, you can really see what impact the machine has on game design, right? And it set me down this rabbit hole, and I think it's probably too complicated to get into here. But the nature of, I worked in the video game industry for a long time, and it was always a challenge with multi-platform games, right? Controllers are more standardized now than they were in the past, but they still have variations. The PlayStation controller, both of its thumbsticks are on the inside, right? The Nintendo Pro controller and the Xbox controller, the left thumbstick is on the outside and the right thumbstick is on the inside, right? Nintendo experimented briefly, which I thought was great, but it never caught on. The Wii U Pro controller, the both thumbsticks were on the outside and the buttons and the D-pad were on the inside, which I thought was I loved it personally, but it never caught on. And then you've got the PC master race, who is convinced that word processing technology is the best way to control video games. And I remember working on these multi-platform games and how much time the UX designers and the gameplay designers spent trying to balance the controls.
Yep.
The same game balanced the controls 3 separate ways for a minimum of 3 different user interfaces, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's crazy to me looking back that they were able to do that. It is almost a miracle that you can make games that the designers are so good enough that they can basically to a certain extent make their games platform agnostic or man-machine interface agnostic, right? I mean, you don't really realize what a marvel it is until you go back and you play a game on such a unique input device, and you go, holy moly, yeah, I get it. I get why the tool that you're using is so it's so important to build for that tool, right? So anyway, that's just sort of my own thought exercise. And then the larger aspect too is I mean, not the larger aspect, but the other aspect of it too is it's remarkable to me, that old idiom, it's like riding a bike.
Mm-hmm.
It's so true, right? I mean, I was using the Pro Controller and struggling to play these games that I knew I was good at, right? Mm-hmm. But then when I got the Nintendo 64 controller and I started playing it, all of a sudden everything fell into place, and it was a weird sensation. You can almost feel the neurons firing in these long dormant neurons firing in your brain, and it was like being 15 years old again. It was cool. Crazy, I guess GoldenEye came out in 97, so I was 16 years old. But it just blew my mind to all of a sudden, between the input device and the muscle memory, to reconnect with that game again, right? Mm-hmm. It was just such an interesting experience, which is why I couldn't help myself when I saw how cheap the Super Nintendo controller was. And sure enough, you start playing the Super Nintendo games with the controller, and it's the same thing. Now, it's not quite to the degree that the N64 controller, because there's a lot of standard features on the Super Nintendo controller that have carried over and are still used to this day. 2 shoulder buttons, 4 face buttons with the D-pad, yada yada yada. But it was still remarkable how all of a sudden, I think for me the biggest, and I'm sorry I'm going on a rant here, but it really was sort of a really interesting, not expressly a thought exercise because I wasn't trying to learn something, but it was sort of a realization, right? Mm-hmm. The big difference between the Super Nintendo controller and most modern controllers is that the D-pad is on the outside here, because there is only a D-pad, whereas on like the Pro Controller, and I think I have one easily accessible, the D-pad is on the inside.
Yeah.
Right? You can kind of see that. And that placement, it changes the angle that your thumb is pressing on the D-pad. So up here uses a particular configuration of muscles, whereas up down here, it's a completely it's totally different. And
it's subtle,
It's subtle, but it makes a huge difference when you get into the game. And all the Super NES games and all those games, you can play the games using an analog stick, but they weren't designed. They were designed for buttons that have an on-off state, not an input curve like thumbsticks have. And it was interesting. It was not something I was seeking out to learn or discover or remember or have a revelation about or whatever, but it was a really fascinating thing from both a mechanical standpoint and a mental standpoint, how the input device that you use has a significant effect on your interaction with the game. So it was a really long-winded ramble, but it was something that I was thinking about, and so I thought I'd bring it up here.
That's pretty cool. Like I think I can't remember. I think it's probably out there on the internet. A lot of people say this, but again, since we're talking about being snobby about mountains, I will say it is worth being snobby about certain types of games, especially ones that are, tied to a certain type of controller.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you get the same experience. It's pretty much everything that you just said. But I mean, in a really quick example, for example, I love Castlevania back on the NES. Played that thing to death, beat it multiple times, and then a few years back, um, I played in an underhanded means on a PC and used a keyboard to beat the
Oof.
game.
Yeah.
Just
Because
so
it's just because you decided that this was going to be your objective.
yeah, it was my well. Also, I want to show a friend of mine. Yes, it's possible to beat Castlevania. It's not,
Yeah, oh yeah.
yeah. Because I guess some people. I don't know how you feel about Castlevania, the first one, but a lot of people consider it really difficult. I think you just. I don't know where you put that in the pantheon of hard games on the NES these days. I don't know where you would.
For
I still
me,
think Mega
for
Man
me,
One.
yeah, I would put it above Mega Man 2, below Mega Man 1,
Yeah,
and below Ninja Gaiden for sure.
yeah. I'm the same boat. I feel same. I feel the same. Yeah. Ninja Gaiden, you have to pretty much beat it in your first run through and try to keep that spiral slice the entire game,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
you'll be fine. That's one way to beat it. You can beat other ways, obviously, but that is I think, the path of least resistance. But with Castlevania, it is hard. So learning it on a keyboard, it was a different experience altogether
Mm-hmm.
than playing with it. Because you're using the QWERTY thing and then the space bar as a jump button. It was very different. And was it the same kind of fun? No. I would much rather have played it with the NES controller. But now I can play it on the Switch, and I have as long as I have a cross pad, or a thumb pad, or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. I'm
Mm-hmm.
good. Because all you really need is just that and a couple buttons. But yeah, it doesn't. Yeah, but definitely playing on native hardware, I think, snobbishly speaking, is the way to go for a lot of these older games.
I don't think it's
So.
snobbish at all, honestly. I mean, I think that's what I'm saying. I think when something is designed to be and I think there's people who would agree with me too. There are purists who seek out old tube televisions to play
Yeah,
Super
sure.
NES games on and NES games on. I think the most classic example is Chrono Trigger. So it's really interesting so Chrono Trigger, oof, okay. Tube TVs, the pixels are not perfectly square. They're
Mm-hmm.
stretched a little bit horizontally. It's just the nature of the way the technology works. And so all old NES games and Super NES games and any game that was pixel based that was put on an old CRT, they tended to squish the graphics a little bit so that when it got projected onto the
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
monitor,
Yep.
it's sort of like how anamorphic lenses work, right? They are very, very squished when they're exposed on the film, and then when they develop it wide so it unsquishes it. It's the same exact principle. Now, fast forward to our modern era, where all of our televisions are all LED and OLED based, and the pixels are perfectly square, right? Emulation is kind of broken a little bit because the original art on these NES games and Super NES games were compressed a little bit, so that knowing that the CRT would decompress it when it projected. But
Mm-hmm.
now
Mm-hmm.
that we have pixel perfect representation of graphics, if you play the example that I saw the first time, I was like, oh wow, that's really cool or interesting. There's a scene in Chrono Trigger where there's like a big moon in the background, and it's this really dramatic story moment in the game, and it looks perfect on an old CRT TV. But if you use pixel perfect mode,
Mm-hmm.
the moon looks like an ellipse. It doesn't look round,
Huh.
right? Because
Mm-hmm.
by design. And so they've cheated a little bit in modern emulator software. If you look at if you look at the Switch stuff or any old school ports onto other platforms, you can go into the options and you can go like you can do a CRT filter, you can do original
Yep.
pixel configuration, and you can do true perfect pixel configuration. And you never want to do true perfect pixel configuration because it won't look right because of the nature of how the game visually was done.
Yeah.
And so I completely understand these collectors who dig up old CRT TVs just to play the old platforms, because it's the only way to really get the original intent from the designers. Again, because of the medium that these technologies were built for, right?
Yeah.
And so it's really, I mean, it's a really fascinating topic, and I don't know. It was just that was just kind of it's been on my mind a little bit in terms of games, is the nature of hardware and how it impacts our interaction with the art medium that we're enjoying. And I'm sorry, I'm drifting a little because I'm kind of, another thought is gestating in my head. It reminds me a little bit of the medium that you can apply this to any sort of entertainment or art form. I remember, you look at pictures of things like the Mona Lisa or any sort of classical piece of art, and you're like, I kind of don't get it, right?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
But for me, at least, and obviously your mileage will vary depending on what your interests are, but for me, at least, I remember the moment where I was like, oh, I understand why this stuff is so moving. It was a couple of things. I was at one art museum in Edmonton, and they had, apparently landscape art is really, really popular in that part of the country. There's a lot of very, very famous landscape artists who worked out of Edmonton. And there was this one painting that was it was a field of wheat with a barn. But they had the light set up that as you walked past the painting, the paint that was used to represent the wheat was applied in such a way that as you walked past it, it looked like the wheat was waving in the wind.
Oh, that's really neat.
Unbelievable. I don't remember anymore. It's been too long. I apologize. Which kills me. I didn't write it down. I mean, it was such a moving piece, and it drives me crazy that I don't remember it anymore.
That's a really cool, interactive. I don't know whether it sounds like it was intentional by the artist.
Oh, how could it not be, right? Yeah.
Yeah, to play with the physicality of the paint to do that. That's really neat and thoughtful.
Right, from
the artist, and keeping the viewer in mind. That's really neat.
Yeah, absolutely. And
now I want to look it up, so we'll look it up later.
Yeah, we'll see if we can see if we can find it
or something.
Yeah, but related to the physical medium, then you go to like another art museum and you look at the different materials, like just basic oil paintings, Caravaggio, watercolors, on canvas, on paper, right? The medium that they use to paint the same types of posters, you get very different feelings from. And one of the most fascinating ones was this, I wish I could remember the piece now, but it was very, very thick oil paints, right? Mm-hmm. And you look at this painting, and there's a three-dimensional aspect to it that does not come through when you're just looking at a photo of it, right? And again, it has to do with the way the light is playing off the paint and how much paint is applied at different parts of the portrait, or the painting. I think it was a portrait, though. And it was clear that the artist was thinking about this, about how thick the layers were for the piece and how thin it was applied. And, the clothing, the paint was clearly applied thicker to give it more dimension and to create physical contrast between the subject and the outfit the subject was wearing. Fascinating. It just blew me away. I stood and looked at this one piece, and again, I have these things, and it kills me that I didn't write them down. I was just in the moment. And then there was this other painting that I saw that was huge. A massive painting, and you really can't get the scale of some of these masterworks until you are standing in front of them, right? Mm-hmm. And this piece was too big to take in. Like, you couldn't just look at it holistically and see all of it. You had to look across it, because your vision isn't wide angle enough, I guess, to see it all in one piece. Mm-hmm. And then I realized, oh my God, that was by design. If you look at it from left to right, it tells a story. Mm-hmm. And so even you can scan it and you can put it on a screen and you can zoom out and you can see all of it at the same time. But the way these paintings were intended to be viewed was to stand near them so you could take in the details and then look across it to see a story develop. Right? Fascinating. And so speaking to the playing the game on the right piece of hardware, experiencing those pieces of art as they were meant to be experienced, which was in person rather than through a screen of some form, it completely changed the nature of the art, right? So anyway, yeah, I mean I think and I know we've said this on the stream before. It goes back to what Alan Moore said regarding his thoughts on the Watchmen movie. He wrote Watchmen for comic books. That was the intended medium. So why would you do it in a movie? He's like, great. You want those themes? You want that topic? Great. Write something that was intended to be a movie. You know,
for that medium.
Mm-hmm. And I think he's right. I agree with him. First of all, I didn't particularly care for the Watchmen film. I'll be honest with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's part of the reason. Is like, well, A, I already know this story, and B, a lot of what you're talking about isn't translating particularly well on screen. So, and it's another reason.
Yeah.
I'm going all over the place here, but I remember Guillermo del Toro and Mike Mignola were talking about the Hellboy adaptation, the first film, and Mignola and Guillermo del Toro were talking about, it's like, yeah, we didn't see much reason in trying to copy one for one the comic book for the movie, right? Mm-hmm. Guillermo del Toro was clearly a fan, and Mike Mignola gave him permission. It's like, Hellboy in the movies, I'm giving this to you. Do with it what you're going to do with it, right? Stay true to the spirit of the character, and then everything else is yours. And it was the right way to go, because I think that if Guillermo del Toro had been boxed in by someone else's vision, I don't think the movie was going to work. But because Guillermo del Toro was able to be a fan of Hellboy and then bring his vision to that character, I think there's a reason why those first two movies are such a cult classic. Mm-hmm. And why the new one that David Harbour was in didn't work as well, because the new one was basically just a combination of a few other stories, mostly The Wild Hunt, which was the one where we find out some interesting things about the character that I won't talk about here. But yeah, so, and that one just didn't work as well. And I also don't think the director was nearly as talented as Guillermo del Toro is. But of course, I do have a bit of a bias there, because my fandom of that particular filmmaker is legendary on this stream. So anyway, wow, that was a really long, rambling dissertation.
Well, in today's stream, we covered old hardware that's considered antiquated in many circles for video games, but it is now revived with the Switch and buying stuff. And then we jumped all over movies and translation of media and paint and galleries.
And traditional art.
Yeah, you did go all over the place, and you said you were tired. So
right, I know, but like I intended to do it, the central theme remained the same across all of the particular topics. Was the nature of the medium should, to a certain extent, dictate how you interpret your art through that medium, or apply your art through that medium.
100%. With all that said, though, it is nice to, obviously adapting a novel or a graphic novel is nice, but we're a really small little sidestep, but, with The Watchmen, the fact that Zack Snyder translated shot for shot everything from the comic book, I don't know if it was really necessary. It was really more fandom tribute than it was making a film in that way. Mm-hmm. And a lot of work to do that. I get that you want to worship the source material, but you should make it something on its own. I found it kind of just odd.
Yeah.
Watching Watchmen,
Yeah, I mean, I think you can worship the source material and still
Sure.
make it your own. I'm not trying to say that like you should never adapt a piece of art
No.
or piece of
Yeah.
work to another medium. I think it can be done, but I think you need to do it with the intended adaptation medium in mind, right?
Yeah. I think as long as you keep this is just I know that I know you don't want to say snobby, but I will say it's snobby for me. But I mean, when you're translating a piece of a novel or something like that, I mean, as long as you kind of keep the source and the core of the character the same and enough of an origin of it to keep, as to why it was popular, I think you're going to be okay. For example, again, I'm a huge fan of Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 1, but he really took some liberties
Oh
on his
yeah,
origin story.
yeah,
But it didn't matter. It's okay. It's still Spider-Man. He still gets the essence of the character, and he still hammers the mantra that Peter Parker has in his whole life in that movie. And so, but did he translate the issue 1 Amazing Fantasy, whatever, Amazing Fantasy 15, panel for panel? No. He did his own thing because he's Sam Raimi and he's a really talented director.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, yeah, I think there's definitely a distinction there where you adapt to the medium that you're working in, for sure.
I think the first Spider-Man is an excellent example, and I think and it's subtle things. You're right. They kept the ethos of the character. They kept sort of the pathos of Peter Parker and why he does what he does. But then they made really intelligent decisions rather than having to explain why this high school student somehow has the chemical genius to invent an entire web fluid, right? They go it's just a part of his mutation, and it made perfect total sense, right? And so no one at any point questioned that he should be able to do this, right? It actually makes more sense than him having to build these web shooters, right?
Yeah.
And I always really liked that. So
yeah, I didn't mind it. I was neutral towards that, but I knew I don't know. I remember when that came, when it came out. There was a little bit of a debate. Oh, he's supposed to have web shooters and not have his mutation. Does that make him a mutant? And even though he's born with it, but yeah, I thought that. But I found it. Yeah, I was kind of the same way. I felt the same way as you did. I thought that was a nice way to modernize it for the screen and for just present day. But for me, I actually didn't. Even if you would have found a way to describe the Peter Parker creator web shooters, I always found that kind of endearing and sort of innocent and cute that he was that smart. I kind of like that aspect of all that era of superheroes in a way, like how they all kind of get their powers this weird way and they're all super smart. I really like that. I thought that was fun, but I didn't mind it either way. I thought again, it's one of my probably top 5 favorite superhero films. Is probably Spider-Man's up there.
Again, legendary. Yeah, just like everybody knows my feelings about Guillermo del Toro. We know your feelings about Spider-Man. So,
yeah. In general, the superhero, yes, I still love Spider-Man. But this is for another stream. But we're pretty much wrapped up here for tonight. But But I mean, it's the whole other thing when I think it's great when superheroes are kind of exchanged. Like to me, one of the smartest things Stan Lee and Steve Ditko and mainly Stan Lee, I guess, who's running things, was he handed the keys over to various artists to do their interpretations or to take a run. And not be so protective of the source material to not let an artist or writer run with it. I think that was great.
Mm-hmm.
But now as we fast forward to that was how long has it been now when Amazing Fantasy came out? Anyways, it's how long it's been. Like it feels like what else can they really do with Spider-Man, for example, or Superman for that matter? Are we witnessing? I don't know. I just I'm always curious. Like what do you do with a hero when so many artists and so many writers have written for it, do you run out of stuff to do with the character? I think the Hulk's a great example too. I love what they did with him, but I don't know what they're doing now with him. Admittedly, I'm a little bit ignorant as to the current version of the Hulk. Last time I read anything on the Hulk, Bruce Banner was killed, so I don't know. Because ultimately, what else can you do with him? Well, let's just kill him. I mean, that's always what they do with heroes, right? In comic books, they have to do something, climactic, something devastating or injury, bedridden type of stuff to them because they run out of stuff to do with them. Batman, all of them have gone through it. So,
Yeah, I mean, killing off superheroes is the equivalent of the wedding episode in sitcoms.
Yes.
It's
Yeah,
inevitable, and you know that when it happens, the character is boring now.
yeah.
Or the show
Yeah.
becomes
Yeah.
boring. I mean, it's the classic
Yeah.
trope of, you know, the series has run out of ideas when you hit the wedding episode.
But again, this is why Spider-Man is great. They kept the character intact by introducing Miles, for example. Like, and now it goes on in a different human, but it's still neat because it's still Spider-Man. But yeah, that's one clever way to do it. Now they can kind of reboot and do a whole bunch of new stuff and make a new mythology for him, which is cool.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, absolutely.
But for Peter Parker, I just don't know. But anywho, just want to show where I left.
Let's see where we're at here
tonight.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we have the Warhog driving by, zooming past camera. So we got that in there, and now we have Warhog coming towards camera.
Nice.
Interesting. You know, as an animator, I'm torn because I want to show all the frames of animation of him and his run cycle here.
Yeah.
But here's the thing: as an editor, I don't want to give. I mean, there's not enough frames here to get to what I want to convey there, but it does convey the movement. So, as an editor, am I going to overrule myself as an animator to go, I want those frames in there, but I can't because I like the timing of this and the editing of this shot. Discuss with the writers' room here. Now that we're in the writers' room with Eric, what are your thoughts as a viewer, and what are you seeing? What's your thoughts? Do you see my dilemma?
I do see your dilemma, and
Okay.
I think your instinct is right, because it is fun to see the Warhog running in that 3/4 kind of foreshortened perspective.
Yeah.
But it doesn't. It would look really weird. I mean, the only thing that I could say is starting the Warhog from making it physically smaller on the screen to increase the foreshortening effect, so that he spends more time getting larger before he comes to a sliding stop. But also, that just means that we're going to be lingering on that shot for longer. And do we really want to spend... Because the comedy is actually the Warhog skidding to a stop. Him running to that position is the intermediary point, right?
Yeah, and this is what I love about animation and the creative process, the group think with it, all of it. And on top of that, years ago when you got into improv, that even adds more to it, because now we can talk about comedy in a sense too, because you have a sense of comedic timing as well, doing improv. And that's what I'm doing as an animator. All we are pretty much, in a strange way, we're actors with pencils. So we're improvising, we're doing comedy and stuff like that, and timing is everything. So yeah, it's interesting. But I'm happy. I'm always psyched when we talk about that type of stuff, on our stream or even offline, to just as we make this cartoon. Yeah, I'm not animating in a box. I have Eric as another floating consciousness that's out there in my brain. Like, so it's kind of fun. But anyway, so I'm not gonna, even though I put that work in tonight in doing these frames of animation, maybe I'll use it someplace else.
Yeah,
but I don't think I'm gonna leave again as an editor, and I'll self-censor my work or self-edit my work. I'm happy with the timing.
Mm-hmm.
I think like what you said is what I'm happy with too. I like the timing of it, the comedic timing of it, and we'll probably just leave it as is. I'm not going to try to stretch out frames just to show some extra drawings of a character that we're doing. It needs to. The story comes first, and the editing comes first, and the timing comes first. So,
absolutely. Yeah, because the funny part, the funny part is the skidding. The funny part's not the running.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, that being said,
there we go.
Sometimes poses can be hilarious, but it has to be. That has to be the joke. The pose has to be the joke, right? Like, one of my favorites is whenever the South Park guys do Cartman sleeping, and they do that really low angle foreshortened with his big belly and his chin into it, and it's just the pose. It just that one frame pose. Every time I see it, I laugh hysterically because it is so. It's just pure comedy. Just all of the proportions, the way everything looks, right?
Yeah. Cartman is a physical comedic character. You need to run with that, and it's great that they do that with the show.
And so in those instances, that art is more important than the timing or the editing, because you can just leave that on screen as long as you want, and it is just funny in a vacuum. Yeah. So.
But cool.
Yeah. Anyway.
So maybe next week I'll continue on. I'll do this post here and we'll keep working. And so we got a little bit more to go. But just keep on trucking.
All right. Sounds good. Well, as always, everybody, you can find us on CalamityJane.rocks. That will take you to our Patreon site, where you can join us by subscribing and helping us make this cartoon a reality. If we actually get some subscribers, we do have some goodies that we'd love to share with people, but that only happens if you join us on this journey, so please consider that. Also, you can find us on Facebook and YouTube. YouTube is where we do the streams and post videos, obviously, and Facebook is where we do updates for everyone about progress and that kind of stuff. So check out those social media platforms for more information. Otherwise, thanks for joining us tonight, and I think we'll be back at the usual Calamity Jane time, usual Calamity Jane hour next week. So stay safe out there, everyone. James, have a good night. And I don't have anything else to say. That was it. I wrapped up there, and I was like, shoot, I have all this momentum, and I got nowhere to go with it.
It's fine. It's good enough. Yeah, you have a good night, and we'll catch up next week.
All righty. Sounds good. Good night, everybody.